where heads of state, sports, entertainment, and political celebrities meet. You're listening to Armstrong Williams.
And welcome back to the Armstrong Williams Show. Thank you so much for joining us for this edition of the Armstrong Williams Show. Melvin Goodman, how are you today?
Good. How are you, Armstrong?
National insecurity, the cost of American militarism. Is it a huge cost, Melvin? Are we paying a huge price, Melvin?
We're talking about a serious amount of money. We're talking about the opportunity to save $1 trillion over the next 10 years at a minimum. We're talking about the $3 trillion we spent in Iraq and Afghanistan, where we gained nothing in two unwinnable situations. We're talking about $50 to $60 billion a year for nuclear weapons that have no utility whatsoever. We're talking about $10 billion a year for national missile defense in California and Alaska that doesn't even work. Yeah, we're talking about a hell of a lot of money.
And where do you place the blame? It's not left or right, is it? What does it have to do? Increased government spending? It's because they're not spending their money, or they just don't care?
Well, I think it is bipartisan. It isn't left or right. It's senators and congressmen who have no experience in dealing with the military whatsoever, who have caved into these military-industrial corporations, what President Eisenhower called the military-industrial complex, and they look at all of these defense programs as jobs programs. So when you build, as we're going to build 2,400 F-35s that we don't need, you look at senators and congressmen who see this as a jobs program in their states. And then you have a firm like Lockheed Martin that gives campaign contributions to over, I would say over 400 different senators and congressmen. And the one who gets the most money from Lockheed Martin just happens to be the chairman of the House Armed Forces Committee in California, Buck McKeon. So the system is totally corrupt. The Pentagon can't monitor it. They don't have the expertise to monitor these weapons programs. So when you have something, again, like the F-35, a fighter aircraft that we really don't need, Lockheed Martin just runs circles around the Pentagon, and every time there's a setback or a loss, we pick up the bill as taxpayers. It's outrageous.
How do we change this?
You change that, you have to change it by people realizing what in the hell is going on and how their money is being wasted. And I talk to a lot of people on the Hill, congressional staffers, who say constituents never call. They never complain about defense spending. They'll call about Medicare, and they'll call about gun control. But it's very unusual for anyone to call about national security, foreign policy, or military spending. So when congressmen have to vote, basically, they have a free ticket. They have a free ride because constituents aren't monitoring them. And if you don't monitor your representatives, they're going to be part of the process of corruption. And that's where we are right now, a totally corrupt system.
You know, President Eisenhower warned in 1961 about the dangers of a military-industrial complex, and was clearly worried about the destabilizing effects of a national economy based on outside investment in military spending. It is really just out of control.
I totally agree. And the speech that he gave, in addition to the farewell speech that everyone cites, just as you have cited about the military-industrial complex, is a speech that he gave early on in his first term, and I wish he had given it every year, about the Cross of Iron. Basically, we're spending the sweat of our laborers, the expertise of our scientists and engineers, and the hopes of our children in order to build up this military machine that we don't need. Remember, this military-industrial complex has always exaggerated the threat. The Soviet threat was exaggerated. International communism was created out of whole cloth. We're exaggerating international terrorism. And when I left the War College, where I was teaching for 18 years, that was in 2004, China was the new threat. They had to find something to replace the Soviet Union when the Soviet Union collapsed. So now we have this self-fulfilling wish with regard to China. And I blame Obama here partially because he's the one who pivoted toward Asia. We shouldn't be announcing a military pivot toward Asia. We shouldn't be pushing China in the way that we pushed the Soviet Union in terms of containment. We should be finding diplomatic ways to have China as a reciprocal stakeholder in diplomatic areas where they agree with us. They agree with us on North Korea, no nuclear weapons. They agree with us on Iran, no nuclear weapons. They agree with us on terrorism. This is where their efforts should go. But for 20 years, frankly, we have not had a Secretary of State who was worth, frankly, a damn thing. You have to go back to George Shultz and James Baker. For 20 years, we've had no Secretary of State who had any impact. I have some hope for John Kerry because I think basically he's trained his whole professional and political life for the job to take over Foggy Bottom. But Obama's got to be willing to use these people. It's not enough just to appoint good people. They have to be used, and this is where the leadership has been lagging, I think, from the White House.
Is there anybody capable of getting this government spending under control?
I don't see it because of the slot that's on the Hill. The legislative branch is clearly the broken branch of government. Obama really hasn't applied himself in the way you need to do it in terms of a full court press to take advantage of his standing, of the bully pulpit, and in dealing, I think, actively with his congressional elements, both Democrats and Republicans. They're making a big deal now about the fact that he finally had dinner with 12 Republican leaders. Well, he's been in office for 4 years. There is just not enough connection the way Franklin Delano Roosevelt practiced it or the way Bill Clinton practiced it. Lyndon Johnson, he was a genius at this kind of thing. And what frustrates me, because I'm a huge Obama supporter, I was in 2008 and I was in the last election, but he hasn't really led here. He's a thoughtful guy. He's a smart guy. I think he understands these problems. He came in with very little background on military affairs, and I think he was rolled by the military, particularly on the ridiculous so-called surge in Afghanistan. People told him the surge in Iraq didn't work, that the surge worked. It didn't work. The fact that we put 25,000 additional troops in Iraq in 2007, frankly, was almost meaningless. He totally misunderstood that, and I think he understands that the military took advantage of him in the first term. That's why I'm somewhat optimistic that we'll do better the second time around, but we've got to look at results.
What happens if our military were to return to its constitutional role and what it was designed for and to be about from the beginning?
Well, then you'd have a real defense structure that would be oriented toward defending the sovereignty and the borders of the United States. You wouldn't have tens of thousands of troops all over the world in places where wars were fought 50 and 60 years ago. You know, why do we have 30,000 troops still in South Korea? I mean, we've built South Korea as a very powerful military element. Why do we still have 40 to 50,000 troops in Germany 60 years after the end of World War II? Why do we have 900 bases and operating facilities all over the world? Why do we have 11 aircraft carriers? China, by the way, has one. So it's this whole mentality. And I think one of the real moves that hurt us badly was when Nixon made a deal with the middle classes in this country and basically said, look, I won't draft your kids and your grandkids, but would you get off the streets and stop protesting my war in Vietnam? And boy, we just love that, not thinking of what the consequences are, that now we have a professional military, that a power-hungry president, particularly someone like George W. Bush, who created lies in order to get us to war in Iraq, could send these troops abroad so he could become a powerful president. Until the country is aware of this, and right now I would say the country is on a long snooze on these issues, I don't think anything is really going to change.
A long snooze is what you refer to it as.
The big sleep.
Well, look, you may call it a long sleep, but I do think, your career in intelligence has positioned you perfectly to document the failure of intelligence, and it has been critical. Talk about our failure in this regard.
Well, my previous book was Failure of Intelligence, Decline and Fall of the CIA, and that really took place in the 1980s, and this is why I resigned in 1991 and testified against Robert Gates as a CIA director. This was when a president, Ronald Reagan, appointed a political ideologue to be head of the CIA. His name was William Casey, and his deputy was Robert Gates. And what Casey and Gates did was to combine, to spin the intelligence so that the White House would get just the kind of intelligence it wanted to support its policies, whether that intelligence was right or wrong, or whether the policies made any sense or not. And it's kind of ironic that here's Obama coming into office in 2009. He reappoints Bob Gates, despite this incredible background of Bob Gates in spinning intelligence. he makes him his Secretary of Defense, which really showed just how naive and out of touch Obama was when it came to foreign policy and national security. So if you're going to spin the intelligence, if you're going to tailor the intelligence, politicize the intelligence, whatever you want to call it, you really don't have an objective intelligence agency, which is what Harry Truman wanted when he created it in 1947. He created the CIA mainly as a check on the exaggerated worst-case intelligence of the military, and it started out that way. When I got to the CIA in the 1960s, and I was a critic of Vietnam at the time, I realized it was the CIA that was fighting the good battle in Vietnam, telling the Johnson administration that these policies are not working. Military policy is not going to work. The Soviet Union and China had nothing to do with Vietnam. It was a civil war, and intelligence could have prevented a real disaster. Well, fast forward to 2002, and you have a CIA director by the name of George Tenet who says slam dunk when the president says, give me some intelligence to take to the American people so I can take them to war. And that's when George Tenet jumped up off his couch and said, slam dunk, Mr. President, we can do that. And that's exactly what the CIA did. Phonied up the intelligence for a president that took us into an unconscionable war that we're going to be paying for a very long time.
Wow, I cannot believe that we're about out of time here. How can we get a copy of your book?
I will get in touch with the publisher to send you a copy. Frankly, I thought you'd already done that.
No. How can others buy the book? Of course, I have it.
Oh, I'm sorry. Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, the big bookstores have it. The cheapest way to get it is Amazon.com. It's a paperback. It's inexpensive. If you have a Kindle, you can get it on your Kindle for about $9 or $10.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you for writing the book. All the best.
Thank you for taking the time to call some attention to this.
Of course.
I appreciate that.